Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Big Blue Sports Talk. I'm your host, Matt Volts, a freshman here at SUNY Fredonia, coming to you live on WCVF. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, whether you're driving in your car or just looking for something to do around the house or whatever. I appreciate you tuning in. So we start, as we always do, with some Fredonia sports. Well, we usually start with some Fredonia sports, but I wanted to cover some sports news because there's a few big stories. The first story, of course, probably the most important and pressing, Bills head coach Sean McDermott had a press conference earlier today and didn't report, I guess, on the status of Josh Allen's elbow. Bills fans might remember that at the end of last Sunday's game against the Jets, which, believe me, we will get to later. I'm sorry, but we have to. One of Josh Allen's last throws, he kind of came up grabbing at his elbow. It was diagnosed as a UCL sprain of some sort. The severity of that, we don't know at this point. However, McDermott categorized the injury as a day-to-day injury. Still no word on Allen's availability for this Sunday's game against the Minnesota Vikings in Orchard Park. And as is usual, One Bills Drive, very quiet about that. They usually don't like injury news getting out to the public before they can report on it themselves. So McDermott didn't really say much. He said he wasn't going to comment a whole lot on Allen's situation. However, it is a day-to-day injury. His status for Sunday's game against the Vikings is questionable, kind of up in the air right now. Josh Allen may be good to go. If not, Case Keenum will get the start against his former team, a team that he took to the NFC Championship game back in 2017. Some other sports news somewhat related to Buffalo a little bit, as former Bills quarterback and Indianapolis Colts head coach Frank Reich was fired on Monday. He was the second head coach to be fired this season. The Colts just have not gotten it going, and I'll express my thoughts on that here in just a second. But first, Jeff Saturday was hired as the Colts head coach. Jeff Saturday was the longtime center of the Indianapolis Colts. He was snapping the ball to Peyton Manning for all those years, and he spent the last several years as an analyst on ESPN. An interesting move to hire somebody who has no NFL coaching experience and has most recently been on ESPN. You know, some teams have kind of started hiring media personalities to run their organization, Raiders, and it hasn't exactly worked. Again, I pick on the Raiders, but they hired John Gruden after he had been out of the league for a handful of years and had been doing Monday Night Football. They hired NFL draft analyst Mike Mayock, who had zero front office experience to my knowledge, as their general manager. And what do you know? Neither one worked. But I'm interested. I love Jeff Saturday. Jeff Saturday was one of my favorite players. I always really liked Jeff. However, it's a peculiar decision because you're bringing somebody in that has no coaching experience. Either way, Frank Reich, of course, we love him in Western New York. Frank, backup quarterback to Jim Kelly for all those Super Bowl years that unfortunately I was too young to have experienced. But regardless, Frank Reich obviously has the achievement of being the quarterback for the greatest comeback in NFL history. The 1992 wildcard round, the Bills were down 35-3 to the Houston Oilers and came back to beat the Oilers 41-38 in overtime. And Frank Reich in college also pulled off a 31-point comeback against the heavily favored Miami Hurricanes. So what does this mean for Reich? I'm not sure. I would imagine that Frank would probably get an offensive coordinator job somewhere else. I'd be surprised if he didn't. I know Bills fans are clamoring for Frank to come home, as some Bills fans are kind of upset with offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey with how the offense played on Sunday. But either way, Frank Reich, we love him in Western New York. Frank was fired as head coach of the Colts. The thing with the Colts is that, in my mind, how can you expect a head coach to be successful when every single year your solution under center is to get a 38-year-old veteran who is about 3 or 4 years past his prime, and that might be being generous for a few of them. I mean, think about the quarterbacks. Frank Reich, to my knowledge, I believe I saw that Frank Reich in the 5 seasons that he started the year as the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, he had 5 different quarterbacks. Now, I don't even know if I can name. I mean, Andrew Luck his first year, obviously. I think Jacoby Brissett was in there one year. He had Phillip Rivers in 2020, Matt Ryan this year, and then Carson Wentz last year. And that's the thing. It's kind of been, and I know Wentz is not, 39, 40 years old, but you had Phillip Rivers in his final year. Now you have Matt Ryan possibly in his final year. So, and Carson Wentz after a, how do I put this nicely, nightmare of a season in Philadelphia the year before. It's definitely, at least in my opinion, how can you expect a head coach to succeed when you never put them with a successful quarterback? I don't really understand how Frank Reich was expected to take the Colts to the promised land. Here's a 40-year-old quarterback who hasn't been good since 2013. Go win us a championship. Listen, Frank Reich's great, but he's not Vince Lombardi. I mean, I'm just being completely honest. You know, it's not like they're going to turn a 6th round. It's not like they're going to turn Sam Ellinger into Tom Brady. And I like Sam Ellinger. Sam Ellinger beat the Georgia Bulldogs. As an Auburn Tigers fan, I love that. But, you know, I don't get it. I don't understand that. So moving away from that, we don't really talk about the Colts a whole lot on this show. So I figured, why not? Why not talk about the Colts? I think that's probably the first time that I've mentioned them, aside from going down the list of the scores all year in the 5 or 6 or whatever episodes we're on. The other news story, and this is just announced. So those are kind of been developing stories. This that just announced, I saw this maybe about an hour ago or so on Twitter that Carl Racine, who is the Attorney General, I hope I pronounced that right, the Attorney General of the District of Columbia is hosting a press conference tomorrow to make a major announcement about the Washington Commanders. Those were the exact words used, major announcement. Not sure what it'll entail. I'm assuming it probably has something to do with everything that's going on with Dan Snyder. Now, a lot of NFL fans, not going to lie, including myself, have wondered if the NFL would be able to remove Dan Snyder from his ownership position. And the answer, to my knowledge, is yes, you can. We've actually seen this play out not in the NFL, but with the Sabres. And this is the first thing that I thought of when I saw that earlier this afternoon, was back in 2002, John Regas was the owner of the Sabres. And he was also the Adelphia Cable Company CEO, big financial guy, hero of Coudersport, Pennsylvania. And it came out that Regas and his 2 sons were, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was some sort of fraud going on. And in June of 2002, the NHL basically stripped Regas of his ownership. And the Sabres for about a year were basically, the NHL handled their day-to-day operations and made sure that their organization didn't completely fall apart at the seams. And then in 2003, when Tom Golisano purchased the team, obviously things improved. But it reminded me of the Regas situation, which I was not around for, but still, it reminded me of what I've always heard about the John Regas situation. I wonder if removing Dan Snyder is A, a possibility, which I believe it is, or B, and probably the bigger question, is it possible? Because you would need, for most things, and I know it's like this for relocation, you would need 24 out of the other 31 owners to approve it. I'm wondering if this is the same. I think it is. Would you have enough people wanting Dan Snyder out in order to support that? That remains to be seen, of course. Okay, so that is a look at just sports news, which turned into NFL news. Either way, some pretty big stories with Reich getting fired, Allen's injury, and then really a developing story about that press conference tomorrow. And we'll see if anything new comes out about that in the next 45 minutes, hour or so. Now we turn our attention to Fredonia Sports. We usually lead off with Fredonia Sports, but sports news kind of seemed like a pressing issue. So Fredonia State's men's hockey team played last night. They were at home against the Nazareth Golden Flyers. I was at this game, and a valiant effort falls just short as the Blue Devils fall 4-3 in overtime. However, they made it close. It was 3-1. Nazareth scored 30 seconds into the game. Yeah, 32 seconds into the game, Nazareth scored. Then about 5 minutes in, a shorthanded goal. So it's 2-0 Nazareth. And everybody in the building is just thinking, oh boy, this is not good. Then Bryce Whitman scored on the power play with about 5.5 minutes left in the first. So that cut it to 2-1. And Fredonia was playing with a little bit more intensity after that. They go into the second, about 5 minutes into the second. Nazareth scores. It's 3-1. So it's 3-1 Golden Flyers after 2, and now Fredonia State's thinking, yeah. It seemed to me, and I talked about this, it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of structure offensively. It just seemed like they were just dumping the puck into the offensive zone and just kind of chasing after it. And when they would have somebody with sustained puck possession in the offensive zone, there'd be like maybe one or two Blue Devils down there. The defenseman would be hanging out way back at the blue line, and I don't know if the other forward was in Narnia or whatever, but it was 3-1, and then the Blue Devils got a power play, and it's almost like when they got on the power play, a switch flipped. Because about midway through the third, Ryan Bailey scores on the power play to cut it to 3-2. And after that goal, it looked like an entirely different team. They were winning puck battles along the boards. They were being physical. And it paid off as about 4 minutes later, Craig McCabe scored on another power play to tie the game at 3, which would eventually send it to overtime. In overtime, the Blue Devils started overtime on the power play. They were unable to score. And when you're on the power play and you can't score, there's one important detail that you've got to remember. You've got 5 guys on the ice. Your opponent has 4 because one's in the box. When that penalty time expires, that guy's coming out of the box. And I wonder if it just didn't quite click, because as soon as the Nazareth Golden Flyer came out of the box, it was Henry McKinney. As soon as he came out of the box, the Naz defenseman picked up the puck, and he was wide open for a breakaway, got in behind the Blue Devils defense. He was one-on-one with the goaltender, and I thought that it was I thought he stopped it at first, and then he didn't. So the Golden Flyers win it 4-3, but a valiant effort by the Blue Devils, no doubt. There were so many penalties in this game. I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was like I actually have to scroll down on my computer like 3 different times so that I can see all of the penalties that were taken in that game. It was unbelievable. Both teams, my goodness, I thought Fredonia had 9 or 10 penalties at one point. Either way, moving past hockey, their record is now sitting at 1-3 as they drop the 2 opening games at Trine in Angola, Indiana. They beat Buff State in their opener 5-3. They lose a tough one to Naz last night. They're back at home against Morrisville on Saturday night at 7 p.m. Now we take a look at a few other sports. Basketball is going on right now. The men's basketball team with their first regular season game, that took place last night at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. And a tough loss, 94-53. Allegheny College comes away with the win. So the Blue Devils start the season at 0-1. Their first home game is not for a while. December 2nd is their first home game. It's a Friday night at 7:30. They're taking on SUNY Cortland. Women's basketball was home last night, however. They were taking on Hiram College, and they came away with the win, 60-51. The Blue Devils win their first game of the season. They are back at home Friday evening at 5:30 to take on William Smith College. That's kind of a weird start time, 5:30. That I don't know. That seems to me like a little bit of a bizarre start time, 5:30. I don't know how I feel about that. One other Fredonia winter sport in action, the women's swimming and diving team. Their most recent competition, they were at Geneseo, taking on Geneseo and Grove City on Saturday. They have won one head-to-head matchup, their first matchup of the season, October 8th. They beat Pitt Bradford 114-45. And looks like their next 2 meets are actually both at home. This Saturday at 1 o'clock, they are hosting U of R and Alfred University. And then next Saturday, November 19th, when everybody gets to go home for Thanksgiving, they are taking on Medaille College at 1 o'clock, looks like, and that's just a 1v1. They'll just be matching up with them. So that's a look at the Fredonia sports. And before we cover our scores around professional sports, we're going to play a little bit of music for you, as we always do. So this song is called Bound to the Game by David James Allen. Hope you enjoy it, and we will be right back on Big Blue Sports Talk.
Been writing songs about the places I've been, people I've seen, all the people I've been, up and down all them highway tours, country roads zigzagging back and forth. Well, Papa never told me I was ever gonna be a smile on display, bound to the page, baby, I'm bound to the game. I spent time learning to pick in songs, singing songs, and I've sang sad, sad songs. A ballad, a waltz, blues, and a honky tonk, just like a stomping tom. I keep rolling on. Papa never told me I was ever gonna be a smile on display, bound to the pain, baby, I'm bound to the game. And Mama never told me I was ever gonna be a smile on display, bound to the pain, baby, I'm bound to the game. I've been working like a dog, playing to club walls, playing for the melody. The echo wings of modesty are crushing down on me. I miss my family. Papa never told me I was ever gonna be a smile on display, bound to the page, baby, I'm bound to the game. Mama never told me I was ever gonna be a smile on display, bound to the pain, baby, I'm bound to the game. Papa never told me I was ever gonna be a smile on display, bound to the page, baby, I'm bound to the game. Mama never told me I was ever gonna be a smile on display, bound to the pain, baby, I'm bound to the game.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system. At the tone, please record your message.
Hey, I'm just calling to let you know that you're listening to WCVF 88.9 The Voice.
I like that song. That was awesome. I like that. That was Bound to the Game by David James Allen on his album, The Architect. Alrighty, so as we usually do on the second part of our show, we'll take a look at the scores around professional sports. We start in the NFL. On Thursday Night Football, the Philadelphia Eagles, in a game that literally nobody predicted to be close. It kind of wasn't. The Eagles beat the Texans 29-17. Philadelphia is 8-0 for the first time in franchise history. They are 4-0 on the road. The Texans dropped to 1-6-1. Sunday's games in Atlanta, the Chargers get the win at the last second. The Chargers actually make a field goal to win a game. What do you know? Miracles can happen. The Chargers beat the Falcons 20-17. LA is 5-3 on the season. The Falcons dropped to 4-5. In Chicago, an offensive shootout between the Dolphins and the Bears. The Dolphins come away with a 35-32 win. Big games from Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle for the Dolphins, but Justin Fields running for 178 yards in the loss. Miami is now 6-3. They sit just a half game behind Buffalo in the AFC East. The Bears dropped to 3-6. In Cincinnati, the Bengals with a dominating win. They take down the Carolina Panthers 42-21. 5 total touchdowns for Bengals running back Joe Mixon, 4 on the ground, 1 through the air. Cincinnati is 5-4. They're 3-1 at home. And the Carolina Panthers dropped to 2-7. In Detroit, things could not go worse for the Green Bay Packers as the Lions come away with a 15-9 win. The Lions are 2-6 on the season. They win their second game of the year. Green Bay is 3-6. The Packers just cannot come through with wins. Aaron Rodgers did throw for 291 yards, and he did throw 1 touchdown, but the Packers unable to get past Detroit. In New England, Frank Reich's final game as the Colts head coach did not go well. The Patriots beat the Colts 26-3. The Patriots defense sacking Colts quarterback Sam Ehlinger 9 times in the win. New England is 5-4, but still last place in the AFC East. The Colts dropped to 3-5-1. Bills and Jets, we'll get to it later. What you need to know, Jets beat the Bills 20-17. Jets improved to 6-3. Buffalo drops to 6-2. Again, more on that one later. We always finish off the show talking about the Bills. In Washington, we just mentioned the Commanders earlier. Washington fell victim to the Minnesota Vikings as Minnesota beats Washington 20-17 for their 6th consecutive win, a comeback victory. The Vikings are 7-1. That's who the Bills will host this Sunday. Commanders drop to 4-5, and they're awaiting what news breaks in that press conference tomorrow. In Jacksonville, the Jacksonville Jaguars beating the Las Vegas Raiders 27-20 after being down 17-0 earlier in the game. Jacksonville improves to 3-6 on the season. They stopped their losing streak. The Raiders are 2-6. And the Las Vegas Raiders have still yet to win an away game in 2022. They are 0-5 on the road. In Arizona, an NFC West battle between the Seahawks and the Cardinals, and Seahawks quarterback Geno Smith continues to impress. 275 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air as the Seahawks come away with a 31-21 win, their 4th straight win. Seattle is 6-3 and still in front in the NFC West. The Cardinals dropping to 3-6. Down in Tampa, it was a battle of two teams that everybody thought were going to be absolutely dynamite, and they have disappointed so far this year, but the Bucs get a much-needed win as Tampa Bay defeats the LA Rams 16-13 on a last-second Tom Brady touchdown pass. The Bucs improved to 4-5 with the win. The Rams dropping to 3-5. A little bit of a Super Bowl slump for the Rams, no doubt. On Sunday Night Football, we had a pretty good game between the Titans and Chiefs in Kansas City. Titans rookie quarterback Malik Willis making his 2nd NFL start, and he played reasonably well. The Chiefs coming away with a 20-17 win. Patrick Mahomes, this stat line is just unbelievable. Mahomes threw the ball 68 times, completed 43 of those passes for 446 yards. Derrick Henry ran for over 102 touchdowns. Chiefs come away with a 20-17 win. My goodness, was every single game 20-17? That's like the 4th 20-17 game that happened last week. The Chiefs are 6-2, and they're right on Buffalo's heels in the AFC. Both teams 6-2. Buffalo does have the tiebreaker because they beat them earlier this year. The Titans dropping to 5-3. They're still leading the AFC South. On Monday Night Football, not exactly a close contest down in the Bayou as the Ravens beat the Saints 27-13. Baltimore is 6-3 and still out in front in the AFC North. Saints dropping to 3-6. We had a bunch of teams on their bye week this past week. Cleveland, Dallas, Denver, the Giants, Pittsburgh, and San Francisco all on their bye week. So we take a look ahead to next week, that getting started as always with Thursday Night Football. And it should be, I think, a fairly decent game, although it's between two teams with not great records. 8:15 on Prime Video, the Carolina Panthers hosting the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta somehow is still tied for first place in the NFC South. How did that happen? I don't know. But it's Falcons-Panthers. Atlanta is favored by 3 points in that game. Sunday's games, we've got another overseas game. It's not in London. This game is being played in Munich, Germany, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will host the Seattle Seahawks. That game will kick off at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. That game on NFL Network. Tom Brady versus Geno Smith. Who would have thought that in 2022? The 1 o'clock games, of course, the Bills hosting the Vikings. That game on Fox. No word on whether Josh Allen's going to play or not. Buffalo opens up as a 4-point favorite. Other 1 o'clock games, an NFC North battle as the Bears hosting the Detroit Lions. The Tennessee Titans at home against the Denver Broncos. The Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Miami Dolphins at home against the Cleveland Browns. The New York Giants hosting the Houston Texans, and the Pittsburgh Steelers at home against the New Orleans Saints. 4:05 game this week, Jeff Saturday's first game as the head coach of the Colts. He'll travel to Vegas to take on the Raiders. Couple 4:25 kickoffs, Cowboys and Packers at Lambeau Field, and Cardinals-Rams in L.A. 8:20 on NBC. This was actually flexed to the Sunday night game, but it will be the San Francisco 49ers hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. I forget which game was supposed to be the Sunday night game. I honestly forget. And then the Monday night game, 8:15 on ESPN, the Philadelphia Eagles, still unbeaten. They are hosting the 4-5 Washington Commanders. So there's the chance to go 9-0 as the Eagles are 11-point favorites going into that game. All right, we'll turn away from the NFL and take a look at hockey. Of course, the Sabres losing last night at home to the Arizona Coyotes in a game that honestly some described as just sloppy for both sides. Buffalo falls 4-1. We'll talk more about that later. The Sabres are 7-6 on the season now. Other games around the NHL last night, the Canadiens beating the Detroit Red Wings 3-2 in a shootout up in Detroit. The Islanders beat the Rangers 4-3 at MSG. The Devils come away with a 3-2 win over the Calgary Flames. The Vancouver Canucks in an offensive shootout beat the Ottawa Senators 6-4, 2 goals from Bo Horvat. The Philadelphia Flyers beating the St. Louis Blues 5-1. The Vegas Golden Knights beating the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-3 in overtime. The Oilers go down to Tampa and beat the Lightning 3-2. The Winnipeg Jets with a 5-1 win over the Dallas Stars. Seattle Kraken beating the Nashville Predators 5-1. A 1-0 win for the LA Kings over the Minnesota Wild. Gabe Vilardi, the only goal scored in that game. Some NHL games on tonight. And let's see who is in action. So 7 o'clock tonight on ESPN Plus, the Florida Panthers at home against the Carolina Hurricanes. Couple 7:30 puck drops. The Montreal Canadiens hosting the Vancouver Canucks. That game on ESPN Plus as well. 7:30 tonight on TNT. It's the Washington Capitals hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then also on TNT at 10 o'clock, the Anaheim Ducks hosting the Minnesota Wild. So normally we go to baseball. Baseball is now over. Congratulations to the Houston Astros, the 2022 World Series champions, defeating the Philadelphia Phillies in 6 games. Houston wins their second World Series in franchise history, defeating the Phillies, of course, and the Astros won the World Series in 2017 when they beat the LA Dodgers. This was Houston's 4th World Series appearance since 2017, as they had 2 pennants but losses, 2019 losing to the Washington Nationals, and then last year falling to the Atlanta Braves. All right, one more league to check on the scores, then we will head to another quick break, and then we'll talk Buffalo Sabres. No NBA games on last night. I believe that may have been a measure that they said no games on election night, but they are back in action. A lot of teams back in action tonight. 5:30 tonight, the Orlando Magic at home against the Dallas Mavericks. Then a couple 7 o'clock games, the Charlotte Hornets hosting the Portland Trailblazers, and the Indiana Pacers at home against the Denver Nuggets. 7:30 tip-offs, the Atlanta Hawks hosting the Utah Jazz, the Boston Celtics at home against the Detroit Pistons. Battle of New York City teams on ESPN as the Brooklyn Nets hosting the New York Knicks, and the Toronto Raptors hosting the Houston Rockets. 8 o'clock tip-off, the Chicago Bulls hosting the New Orleans Pelicans, the Minnesota Timberwolves at home against the Phoenix Suns, the Oklahoma City Thunder host the league best Milwaukee Bucks, and the San Antonio Spurs hosting the Memphis Grizzlies. Then a couple 10 o'clock tip-offs, a Battle of Los Angeles on ESPN as the LA Clippers host the struggling Lakers. Lakers are 2-8. And then also at 10 o'clock, the Sacramento Kings hosting the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that's a look at your kind of around the horn sports, and we will take just a quick break and then come back and talk about the Buffalo Sabres. But first, we will play some music for you. This song is called Do It Over by the Districts on their album Great American Painting. We hope you enjoy Do It Over. We'll see you right back here on Big Blue Sports Talk in just a couple minutes.
Take me back. I wanna start again. Do it over. Before it was all such disorder. Do you believe in me? 'Cause I believe in you.
lost my way. Is it over? Do it over. Do I face the facts? Were we ever pure? How can you be so sure?
Tune in every Friday at noon to catch one of Fredonia's hottest radio shows, High Noon Friday. Catch the community voices on local news. Keep updated on the latest sports games, the weather, world affairs and international news, and other entertaining segments like trivia and just the facts. High Noon Friday, every Friday at noon, on 88.9 WCVF and 89.5 WDVL.
Hey, thanks for listening to WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Stay tuned for more music, news, and entertainment.
Welcome back to Big Blue Sports Talk. I had to put in the promo about High Noon Friday. I was a contestant on Sports Trivia last week. I did not come away with the win. Congratulations to my worthy opponent, Sarah. Anyways, now it's time to talk Buffalo Sabres. Now, it was a tough loss for Buffalo last night. They lost 4-1 at home to the Arizona Coyotes. Tage Thompson scoring Buffalo's lone goal. Karel Vejmelka stopping 32 of 33 shots. The Sabres lose their third straight game. They dropped to 7-6 on the season. Buffalo's going through a little bit of a tough stretch, but this season it really has been somewhat streaky. I mean, they split their first two games. Then they won three in a row on the road trip. Then they lost back-to-back. Then they won 3 in a row, and now they've lost 3 in a row. So the Sabres are looking for maybe a little bit more consistency and not avoiding some of these downtrodden streaks. Buffalo has 2 big games coming up on their schedule. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, the Sabres are home against the Vegas Golden Knights. Jack Eichel making his return to Buffalo. We all remember how that went last year. If you don't remember how that went, the Sabres beat Vegas 3-1, and Peyton Krebs and Alex Tuch, the two main players who came over in the trade, both scored. And then Jack Eichel was all grumpy in his post-game press conference. But that was really a huge win for that locker room last year. They really rallied behind the team after winning that game. But another big one Thursday night. And again, I mentioned last week when we saw Carolina, Tampa, Vegas, Boston coming up, I said last week, this stretch is a chance for the Sabres to essentially prove that they are for real. This is a chance for them to show what they're made of. Unfortunately, 3 straight losses is not encouraging. However, I think a lot of people, when the Sabres were starting hot and they were second place in the Atlantic Division, I think a lot of people were saying, oh my gosh, this is it. We're going to make the playoffs. And now that they're not at that level or haven't been in the last week or so, people are thinking, here you go. It's another classic Buffalo start. It's another hot start that the Sabres have, and they're just going to flame out like they always do. I am not so quick to go there just yet. I don't think that I would go there because this is a young team. Losses are going to happen. Listen, should they lose at home 4-1 to the Arizona Coyotes? No, probably not. But sometimes you lose games that you shouldn't. It happens. It's a thing. You're not going to win all 82 games. And that's kind of a theme that I'll stick with the Bills in a little bit when I get there too, is that people are kind of freaking out, and you got to keep in mind it's a long season. More so focusing on the Sabres now. It's a long season. There's 82 games. The Sabres are only 13 games in. They're 7-6. That's not bad. For a young team, that's not bad. Buffalo also 4-1 is maybe a little bit misleading because there were some goals. Like I'm watching the Matthias Maselli had a power play goal that he didn't even, at the end of the first period, which actually ended up being the game winner. He was trying to pass it to the middle. He was trying to center it. Dylan Cousins got there, but it went off of Dylan Cousins' skate and into the back of the net. So a recap of the game. Buffalo, the theme again, Buffalo just giving up goals that they shouldn't be. 23 seconds into the game, Lawson Krause scores from Matthias Maselli. That's Krause's 6th of the year. So it was 1-0 Arizona 23 seconds into the game. Then it evened out a little bit. About 5.5 minutes to go, Buffalo gets a power play. Tate Thompson scores his 8th of the year. Assists coming from Rasmus Dahlin and Jack Quinn. So Buffalo ties it at 1. And then 2.5 minutes left in the period. Arizona's on the power play, and Matthias Maselli tries to center it. It goes in off Dylan Cousins' skate. So it's 2-1 Arizona after 1. Nobody scored in the second. 2-1 Arizona going into the third. And then 2 minutes and 24 seconds into the third, Liam O'Brien scores his first goal of 2022, assists from J.J. Moser and Clayton Keller. 3-1 Arizona. And then with about 2 minutes to go, Clayton Keller with an empty netter, his 4th of the year. O'Brien and Travis Boyd getting the assists. 4-1, Arizona comes away with the win. The Sabres outshot Arizona 33-24, and they were outshooting them for most of the game. Buffalo has maybe their best game from the faceoff dot that they've had all year, as they won 35 faceoffs compared to 23 for Arizona. Penalty minutes, Arizona 12, Buffalo 10. Buffalo was out-hit by a slight margin, 15-12. The next time the Sabres match up against Arizona on December 17th, that will be in Arizona at the arena, and of course they're playing at a college arena. So a disappointing night for the Sabres on a night where a lot of people were saying that the Sabres were generating good shots. They just couldn't make anything happen. I mean, Karel Vejmelka, who, if I recall correctly, has given Buffalo some problems in the past, just had an outstanding game. And that's happened a few times this year where teams' backup goaltenders have outstanding games. Samuel Montembeault had a great game for Montreal earlier in the year when the Sabres played him. I think Chris Driedger had a really good game for Seattle when Buffalo played them. It's just, Anton Forsberg also played reasonably well when the Sabres played Ottawa. So you have to, I guess it's a sense of what more can the Sabres do to buy a goal? And I think that the key there is to accept that some games you're going to get good shots and they're just not going to go in. There are some goaltenders that are very good in this league. Sometimes you're going to have decent offensive nights. You're going to create good chances. You're going to get good shots, and they're just not going to go in. That happens from time to time. But you've got to be consistent in terms of getting shots to the net, in terms of always generating high-danger chances. You can't go a game where you only have like 15 shots on goal. You can't do that. No, you need to have, 30, 32, 33 shots on goal every night. And then some nights, that'll only result in 1 or 2 goals. Some nights, maybe you can score 4 or 5 on that. But the thing is, Buffalo needs to be consistent offensively. And this is a very young team. So consistency is something that we kind of figured might evade them a little bit, and it has at times. I think that the Sabres basically just need to keep in mind that it is a long season. I mean, it's 82 games. They're only 13 games in. I think that the fact that they are 7-6 right now I think that's a reasonably good start for a team that not a lot of people are predicting to make the playoffs. 7-6 is a solid start. We'll take that. I mean, obviously when they were 7-3 and had won 3 in a row, it was better. But you'll take a 7-6 start through your first 13 games for a young team like this, who after 11 years of wandering through the darkness feels like maybe they've started to figure something out. Not sure if that's the case, if they've really figured it out, if it was a fluke. I think these guys have it figured out. I think the Sabres, I think this is a good team. I think it's a very young team, though. That's the thing. I do think this is a good Sabres team, but they're young. They are going to make a lot of mistakes. They are going to frustrate the heck out of us some nights. It's bound to happen with a young team. But this is a young team. I feel like in the past, former Sabres coaches, general managers, whatever, would make the excuse that, we have a very young team. And they would kind of use that as an excuse to make it seem like all of their losing was okay. But the Sabres, even though they've lost 3 in a row, they're not losing like they did in those years. Those were years where they'd be like 2-8 through their first 10 games. This is a year where Buffalo, I think right now, is just going through a little bit of a tough stretch. I think that they are struggling a little bit. So Thursday night's game against Vegas is on ESPN Plus and Hulu. So that's not an MSG game. And they've got some other big games. They've got actually Arizona was their first of 4 consecutive home games, as they host they host Vegas Thursday night. They host Boston on Saturday night, and then Tuesday, November 15th, they're at home against the Vancouver Canucks. I will be at that game. Please win, Buffalo. I have not seen the Sabres. This is a true story. The last time I saw the Sabres win a regular season game, March 30th, 2008, they beat the Boston Bruins in overtime. That's the last time I've seen these guys win a regular season game in person. I don't remember that. I was a little kid. I don't remember anything about that game. I went to a couple preseason games this year. They won both. Hopefully the trend continues. So after that Vancouver game, they go on a little bit of a Canadian trip, as they've got 3 games in Ottawa on November 16th, Toronto on the 19th, Montreal on Tuesday the 22nd. Then they come home for 3. They play the St. Louis Blues. This is a game that I'm really excited for. Wednesday, November 23rd, the night before Thanksgiving, the Sabres at home against the St. Louis Blues, 7 o'clock puck drop. The theme of the game is 90s night, and that is the first game that the Sabres are wearing their red and black jerseys for, and I am so excited that I've had that game circled. Ever since that came out, I've had that game circled just about as much as I've had the January 19th game against the New York Islanders circled, because that's the night the Sabres are retiring Ryan Miller's jersey. I am very, very excited for that game. That's going to be really fun to see them in the red and black. And I know that some people are not exactly huge fans of the red and black, but the way I look at it is the Sabres were good for most of those seasons when they were in the red and black, with the exception of 2002, 2003, when the NHL stripped Regis of his ownership and the Sabres were a complete mess from top to bottom, and they were selling off parts and pieces of their 1999 Stanley Cup team left and right like it was a farmer's market. I mean, that really, aside from that, how many great years did Buffalo have in those red and black, the goat head uniforms? I mean, you had the hardest working team in hockey, Ted Nolan's 96-97 crew, the first year in their new arena that beat Ottawa in the playoffs. They went to the conference finals in 98. They went to the finals in 99. They almost went to the Eastern Conference Finals again in 2001. And then, of course, probably my favorite season of all time, 2006, when the Sabres were 1 win away from the Stanley Cup Finals, and then their entire defense got hurt. Still a little hurt about that. But that, it just... Either way, that will probably never go away, thinking the Sabres should have won the Stanley Cup in 2006, because I think if everyone was healthy and the Sabres had beaten Carolina in Game 7, it would have been the Sabres against the Oilers in the Stanley Cup final. I think the Sabres were on such a roll that they would have won the Cup. That is a frequent theme of this show, and where I'm at, I will never stop talking about how the Sabres should have won the Stanley Cup in 2006. They were so close. Alrighty, so that's kind of a look at the Sabres. They lost 4-1 last night, but I think they're going to figure it out. I think they'll be okay. Sabres are 7-6 at home against Vegas on Thursday night. So we're going to play one more song for you. Then we'll come back and we will finish our show as we always do, talking about the Buffalo Bills. And we got a lot to talk about, of course. But first, we're going to play a song called Catharsis Train by Nightbird Casino on their album Russian Carpet. So we hope you enjoy Catharsis Train. Then we'll be right back to talk Buffalo Bills. Stay tuned on Big Blue Sports Talk.
Trains leaving after
Alrighty, so that was Catharsis Train by Nightbird Casino on their album Russian Carpet. So for the last about 7 or so minutes of our show, we will talk about the Buffalo Bills. But first, we always have to do our weekly Grapevine announcement. And this is about the guest speaker event that's going on here at SUNY Fredonia. So join the Music Industry Club November 10th on Zoom at 8 p.m. That is tomorrow night, as California-based fifth wave emo band Glass Beach will be taking questions from the club's general body and talking about their experiences in the music industry, ranging from being signed to Run for Cover Records to being reviewed by the Needle Drop. So definitely join that Zoom meeting with the Music Industry Club. That sounds like fun. You'll get to ask some questions to a real band. That sounds awesome. So another thing that we like to do, and it's another segment that I kind of would love to start, this day in Buffalo sports history or something to that effect. And I have to thank for some of this, I have to thank there's a Twitter account called This Date in Buffalo Sports History. I have to thank them for some of the information that they have provided that they share on their Twitter account. So the first one, there's actually two, kind of a doubleheader today. November 9th, 1986, Marv Levy's first game as head coach of the Buffalo Bills. You may remember he took over mid-season after the head coach Hank Bullitt was fired. The Bills beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 16-12 thanks to 100 yards and touchdowns on the ground from running back Rob Riddick. And November 9th, 1990, at the Aud in Buffalo, the Sabres get 2 goals each from Donald Audette and Dave Andrechuk, 3 points from Doug Bodger. There's a name that most Buffalo fans probably haven't heard in forever, as the Sabres beat the Vancouver Canucks 7-1 at the Aud in Buffalo. So to finish out our show, we got to talk about the Bills. It was a tough loss on Sunday. Buffalo falling 20-17 to the New York Jets. They dropped to 6-2 on the season. Both losses have been on the road. Both losses have been in the division. A scoring summary. The Bills actually started the scoring here. On their opening drive, they went 67 yards, 14 plays, capped off by a 1-yard Josh Allen touchdown run. So about 4.5 minutes left in the first quarter, and the Bills are up 7-0. The Jets drove down, and with about 30 seconds left in the first quarter, Greg Zuerlein nails a 53-yard field goal, and the Jets are on the board trailing 7-3. Buffalo would get the next score, about 6.5 minutes left in the first half. Allen would run 36 yards to the house, capping off a 9-play, 93-yard drive. The Bills are up 14-3. Jets would drive down the field at the end of the half. Michael Carter with a 6-yard touchdown run with just 32 seconds left. So it was 14-10 Buffalo at the half, and then it seemed like the wheels kind of started to fall off for the Bills, as they just couldn't do anything offensively. 4 minutes left in the third quarter. Zach Wilson, a 7-yard touchdown pass to James Robinson to put the Jets ahead 17-14. That was following a Josh Allen interception. And then in the fourth quarter, Tyler Bass hitting a 51-yarder early in the fourth quarter to tie the game at 17. The Jets would then drive down the field. A minute 43 left. Greg Zuerlein with a 28-yard field goal to put the Jets ahead 20-17. Buffalo's final drive ended up not going so well. Allen took a hit. That's when his elbow got hurt. And then it ended up being 4th and 21, where Allen had to throw a deep shot to Gabe Davis. And he actually hit Davis right on the numbers, but Gabe could not hang on. Sauce Gardner with the coverage. Jets win it 20-17. Allen in total was 18 of 34 for 205 yards, and he threw 2 interceptions. He ran for 2 touchdowns. Zach Wilson, 18 of 25 for 154 yards and a touchdown. Allen was Buffalo's leading rusher, 9 carries for 86 yards and 2 scores. Michael Carter for the Jets, 12 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs had 5 catches for 93 yards. Garrett Wilson of the Jets, 8 catches for 92 yards. So the Bills are 6-2, and the general thought is, oh my goodness, the Bills just lost to the New York Jets. Josh Allen is injured. The sky is falling. End times are near. And I think we need to pump the brakes on that a little bit. I was thinking about this the other day. Back in 1991, when the Bills were rocking and rolling and going to the Super Bowl every year, the Bills played a game up in New England, and they played against the 3-8 Patriots. Buffalo went into this game at 10-1. Keep in mind, this is at a time where the Patriots were like horrendously bad. So the Bills go in, and Jim Kelly throws 4 interceptions, and the Patriots win 19-10. And everybody's thinking, holy cow, Buffalo looks like a nightmare. And at the end of the day, it didn't affect the Bills. Buffalo ended up finishing the season 13-3 and going to their second of those 4 Super Bowls. The moral of the story is, I get it. There's reason to be concerned about the offense, and I absolutely share that concern. There's reason to be concerned about Josh Allen. I share that as well. However, in my mind, as long as Allen is healthy, the Bills are fine. I think that if Allen is healthy, Buffalo will be able to rebound. I mean, look at after they lost to Miami, they won 4 in a row. So I think they're going to be all right. They got a tough game on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. That is true. With Case Keenum under center, I don't know how I feel about that. There is the revenge factor, though. Playing against his former team, Case will come out with a little extra motivation and extra chip on his shoulder if he has to play. Right now, we have no idea who's going to start at quarterback for the Buffalo Bills on Sunday. We have no idea. Nothing is getting leaked out of one Bills drive. Allen could be out for 3 weeks. Allen could play Sunday. We have absolutely no idea. If Allen is out, that worries me a little bit, but he's going to be back. And when he's back, they'll be fine. If Allen is healthy, they're fine. That at least is my opinion. I think that, and I thought about this the other day as well, we have been so trained over the last 25 years to think so negatively about the Bills because it's just been terrible play after terrible play. I mean, how many years do we have to sit back and watch somebody like J.P. Lossman or Ryan Fitzpatrick? And I know we love Fitzpatrick, but we also remember how he used to force a lot of passes and whatnot. You know, I think that we are so afraid of returning to that era that every time Buffalo loses, it's like, oh my goodness, here we go again. And I think we need to pump the brakes on that. I think that we got to recognize, listen, this is a great football team. We have a great team to cheer for. It's going to be all right. They are still going to win. Keep in mind, we're only halfway through the season. Buffalo's not even halfway through the season. They play 17 games. The Bills only played 8. Most people predicted them to be 6-2 at this point. Moral of the story, if Josh Allen's fine, the Bills are fine. If Josh Allen's not fine, the Bills will be fine when he comes back. I think that we just need to kind of take a deep breath and realize that the Buffalo Bills are good. And when they're on their game, I don't know if there's anybody in the NFL who is capable of beating them. That is the reality that we live in. So I'll leave you with that thought. That will do it for today's episode of Big Blue Sports Talk. We'll be right back here next week, November 16th, same time, same place, to talk about the Bills-Vikings game. We'll recap the Sabres and, of course, take a look at sports news, sports scores, and the Fredonia Blue Devil Sports. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to Big Blue Sports Talk and everybody at Fredonia Radio Systems who makes this show possible. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great Wednesday and a great week. Go Blue Devils. I'll see you right back here next week. Bye now. Be well.